I think that that's how this chapter begins. I think if people experience a trauma, um, that they're unable to participate in life fully, or love, or caring, or whatever it might be, or the acceptance of love, uh, because, they're in that fight or flight impasse. Um, for most people, it involves finding a way to become calm and focused, learning to maintain that calm in response to images, thoughts, sounds, physical sensations that remind one of the past, so triggers, finding a way to fully be alive in the present and engaged with people around you, and not having to keep secrets from oneself, including secrets about the ways that you have managed to survive. So, one of the things that I found interesting about therapy, I don't think I've experienced any kind of severe trauma, but I had a lot of issues. And so one of the things that I personally experienced about both being in therapy and being a therapist for others over the years is that there's really nothing about my life that I feel uncomfortable talking about. I know I can't talk about certain things in certain situations because it would not be appropriate. Uh, but in whatever circumstance it is, uh, I wouldn't even call it inhibition. It's just my story. It's who I am. You know, I kind of accept myself, my past. It got me to where I am right now. I've made the changes I want to make. I'm still working on some. And but I think that's something about both being a client and being a therapist. It's not that we lose sensitivity to certain subjects. Um, I think it's that we become comfortable with humanity and everything that humanity includes. We accept whatever individuals bring to the session, and in doing so, we learn to accept ourselves as being human and imperfect, and all of those crazy quirks that make individuals human. I think that, since while we're talking about this subject, I think the two areas where people who become therapists and clients, the two areas people seem to be most uncomfortable talking about it, and I was too when I started out. The first one is death. Americans are not comfortable talking about death, either one's own eventual death or the death of others. We're not sure what to say. We're not sure how to talk with other people about loss, about grief. And it used to be called the elephant in the room, you know. We're getting better at it, but I think that like even if we're at work and all of our colleagues know that we've lost a loved one, they are kind and empathic, but eventually, couple weeks, hey, it's back to work as normal. And we know that grieving takes at least a year. It's called the year of firsts. It's the first year we go through every holiday or anniversary without that other individual being with us physically. So, and then we feel uncomfortable expressing that grief after a limited amount of time, and yet we are still grieving. And people often don't understand unless they have experienced a loss themselves. The second area that people feel very uncomfortable talking about is human sexuality and all of the various aspects of sexuality. And so I think if anybody is in therapy for an extended period of time, human sexuality comes up as a subject. It's a large part of life, or the lack of sexuality, whatever it might be. But it's an integral part of humanity. But a lot of Americans, a lot of therapists are not comfortable with that subject. So if we're not comfortable with what might be considered healthy sexuality, we're probably not comfortable talking about unhealthy sexuality, like sexual abuse. So I think it's important that when I was in my master's degree, one of the courses we were required to take was human sexuality and counseling. It's not required for this program because it's not a CACREP requirement, but it is required in certain states. So if you plan on moving to another state, you might want to consider taking that course. I think it's going to be offered this winter as an elective and counts as an elective. Grief and loss is probably going to be offered this summer as an elective. But those are the two areas. And both of those areas, death and sexuality, are related to the healthy aspects of being a human being. It's the cycles of life, it's intimacy, but they're also related to trauma. We can be traumatized by death, grief, loss, our own death. We can be traumatized by unhealthy abuse or sexuality. So it has both of those extremes included in it. And I think we have to be comfortable with those subjects so that a client can be comfortable communicating their experiences with us. So one of the interesting things is a new focus for recovery. In order to regain control over oneself, we need to revisit the trauma sooner or later. However, you need to confront what has happened to you, but only after you feel safe that it will not re-traumatize you. The first order of business is to find ways to cope with feeling overwhelmed by the sensations and emotions associated with the past. And then it begins talking about the mind again. So we had all those chapters on how the amygdala functions as a regulatory entity, and it's talking about the limbic system here. There's a nice little graphic. And the limbic system therapy, repairing faulty alarm systems, restoring the emotional brain to its ordinary job of being quiet background, connecting with partners, protecting children, being a defense against danger. And they have this picture of the brain, and it says the rational analyzing part of the brain centered on the dorsal lateral prefrontal cortex has no direct connection with the emotional brain, where most imprints of trauma reside. But the medial prefrontal cortex, the center of self-awareness, does. So what they're saying here is that the more cognitive, analytical aspect of our brain will not directly connect us with the emotional part of our brain. So that's not the way. Logic is not the way to address trauma. And that's why, a lot of people want to use CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, REBT. They want to deal with irrational thought processes. But even though we have those thought processes and it may seem like it's working, it doesn't address those deeper emotional issues that we've maintained from the traumatic experience. And so instead, they are hypothesizing that, or proposing that we should reach those underlying emotional issues through self-awareness. And, I know a lot of students who are really into kind of mindfulness and yoga and meditation and all of these, people might call them new age therapies, but all of the newer things in reality, they're ancient things, older than psychology and psychiatry. And, I think that, a lot of the things that people have practiced are finally getting accepted in kind of our modernized world. And we're blending these more traditional practices with more scientific methods now. So I'll tell you another story. So I was never into like, yoga or meditation or anything like that. Just like I wasn't into EMDR, and now I'm like sold on it. But so I spent a while in India, and my friends who I went with, they wanted to go to an ashram in the Himalayas. And I'm like, well, I've always wanted to see the Himalayas. They would pronounce them Himalayas. But I didn't really want to go to an ashram, but hey, I went. And, so about 4 times a day, every 6 hours, they would ring a gong, and we would go into, I guess, their sacred space, and we would meditate. And I said, I don't know how to meditate. I'm talking with one of the monks there, and so because normally people who would go to this ashram, if they're from another country, they're into the meditation thing. They know what's going on. I'm like, I don't know what to do. So I was with this really elderly monk, and he's dressed in the orange robes, and he says, do you know why we wear these orange robes? I said, no, I guess, I just thought it was, you picked a color and, you belong to this order of monks. He's like, no, if you see a group of monks walking across the hills of the Himalayas, they're far enough away. You don't know that they're people. They look like dancing flames as they move across the hilltops. And that's why they wear, it's called saffron robes. And the reason he was telling me this is because he said, you don't have to worry about meditating at all. All you have to do is breathe and watch a candle. That's it. Breathe and watch a candle. And, so we talked about breathing, and breathing in through our nose, holding it for a second, and then out through our mouth. And, diaphragmatic breathing, which is like if we think about breathing, we want our chest to expand, but it's really not from our chest, it's lower from our diaphragm. And we kind of want the top of our stomach to expand when we breathe. It's a deeper breath. And he says, use all of your senses when you breathe. Just think about breathing and looking at the pretty candle flame. And so, he's like, think about how it feels so good to get all that extra oxygen in your body. And because if we're tense, and he could probably tell I was a little uptight, he's like, if you're stressed out, you're not breathing deeply, you're not getting enough oxygen in your bloodstream. And it will help you to relax physically. And think about how the air feels coming into your body and filling your lungs and then going out of your body. And then think about how it sounds as you breathe. And and then once you get into a steady breathing rhythm, watch the flame of the candle dancing and relax. And if you find that your mind is wandering, just remind yourself, don't be hard on yourself. Everybody's mind wanders. Just remind yourself to look at the flame again if you're thinking about something else. Think about breathing again if your mind's wandering. And so all of these things that seem so simple are really just bringing us into the present moment. They're just simple ways to bring us into the present moment. The breathing is a way to get us in touch with our own bodies and to be present. So it's the first step of meditation and self-awareness. Eventually, you could, if you're religious, you could add prayers, you could add daily affirmations, whatever you want to add to it. But after a week of this, doing like 6 times a day, I felt pretty comfortable at the end of it, and I felt revitalized and renewed in a way that I hadn't before I got there. And it was such a simple thing. And I think that simplification, taking the time a few times a day to center myself and to breathe and not think about the past or not worry about the future. And I'd never really done that before. I think it kind of recentered my focus and grounded me in some way. So, this is one of the first things that it talks about in our book is finding a way to refocus ourselves. So they have a whole chapter on yoga, but so learning how to breathe calmly and remaining in a state of relative physical relaxation. It sounds very simple. Even while accessing painful and horrifying memories is an essential tool for recovery. So they call this emotional regulation techniques. And at the core of self-recovery is self-awareness. It says simply noticing our annoyance, our nervousness, our anxiety immediately helps us to shift our perspective and opens up new options other than our automatic habitual reactions. So in behavioral modification, we would call this catching oneself. And so when we become aware of our physical reactions to our embedded emotional trauma, and we notice how we're displaying those emotions through a physical reaction. So let's say we smell something and it triggers an emotional response, and we become nervous and anxious, and our chests tighten, and our muscles are tense, and we're having this physical, more visceral reaction because of a memory that triggers us emotionally. If we're aware of what's happening and we tell ourselves, I'm having a physical reaction to an emotional response to this trigger, then we're able to remind ourselves to go through this calming, mindful relaxation to bring us back. Because before, somebody who's experienced trauma, remember, they're stuck in that fight or flight response, and they're no longer in control, mindful control of their physical reaction to an emotional trigger. So if we can remind ourselves, hey, this is what's happening, I can bring myself back into the mindful present rather than reliving the past as if it is occurring in the present again. So that's the concept. The first trick is to separate the past from the present and to be able to bring ourselves back into the present. So, they have all different types of processes for this. They say, of course, a support network is the most important aspect to protect against trauma. If somebody experiences a crisis, if they have a positive support network, they'll be more resilient. But we also need that same support network to help us to heal from that trauma. It talks about choosing a professional therapist. And, I hate to say this, but it's like choosing a therapist is like choosing a doctor. There's some great therapists and there's some poor therapists out there. And even if you have a therapist you like, they might not have a lot of training in trauma. I know when I started, I had no training in trauma, but I recognized that. And, I went through years of supervision and talked about my cases and got suggestions. And I had great supervisors who helped me and taught me. And now we teach more about it, but one class in crisis and trauma is probably not the same. It's more like an overview of the subject. So, a lot of counselors might talk about, yeah, you can come and see me for trauma, but half of them are going to want to talk about the traumatic experience right off the bat. And we know that's not healthy. Sometimes if that happens, the client won't come back to that counselor, but they won't go back to any counselor. They won't try a different one either, because they don't want to re-experience the trauma. They don't want to re-experience that anxiety. So I think it's really important to, choose the right therapist to get appropriate training more than just this one class. If you're really interested in working with individuals who have experienced trauma, then, go to a practicum or clinical field internship where, you can get more training, or, get a job with good supervision in this subject. they did mention some interesting therapies like sensory motor therapy, um, uh, somatic experiencing, and those have a lot to do with, well, sensory motor experiences, everything from if they're children, they might have a play therapy room, you might use, um, things that have to do with non-threatening touch, like, uh, they might have all different things in a sensory motor room, like they might have a tub full of plastic balls. So they're experiencing those sense of touch in a very safe environment. Um, Also, things like expressive arts, like music, rhythm. Um, they did talk about something that I would have found very difficult, but I want to get the right word for it. Um, well, it was in a part of Africa that had a lot of violence, and they went through a process of reconciliation. And I know they did this in South Africa after apartheid. When I spent some time there and talked to people about the reconciliation process, but they also did this in other areas that um, had two factions, and there was a lot of horror and trauma, and um, there had to be some forgiveness and reconciliation after, or it would reoccur. But I would find that very, very difficult if um, one person experienced, a trauma like a death in the family at the hands of another individual, and they were brought together to reconcile, and they do have a ceremony for that. Um, but he was able to witness that. And one of the parts of the ceremony that he attended was um, music and singing. And I think that uh, a lot of things that people are drawn to, like drum circles or chanting, or maybe some type of, if you're religious, some type of religious music. Um, but people are drawn to rhythm and vibration for healing as well. Um, they do talk about medication a little bit, and they kind of said what I've maintained, that sometimes medication is needed, but it doesn't cure anything. We don't have medications that cure. We only have medications that if somebody's having a panic attack and you give them a benzodiazepine, it might help them to calm down and stop the panic attack. But it doesn't stop them from having panic attacks. Um, the So one of the number one drugs the VA gives the military who have post-traumatic stress disorder are beta blockers, um, specifically propranolol. And what that does is people are having a physical response to that emotional trigger. So, like on the 4th of July, they might hear fireworks and it reminds them of, missiles and bombs. And so their physical reaction is to have a racing heart, which brings about anxiety. So, a beta blocker calms the rhythm of the heart and slows the beat. And so the result is lowered anxiety. So they've done a lot of studies. Beta blockers can prevent heart attacks. So that's one of the pleasant side effects. It does lower anxiety, but it doesn't cure PTSD. 8:40. All right, well, you know, since we have a guest, I guess we'll go through some stress inoculation. Don't pack up yet. So couple people, the primary person was named Wolpe, Wolpe, and they came up with what's called stress inoculation to deal with phobias and panic attacks, but it seems to do well to begin a session for an individual who also is suffering from trauma or PTSD. So we're gonna do the first two parts of it. There's three parts. There's breathing, there's muscle relaxation, and then there's mental visualization. We're not going to do the visualization part. It's kind of a guided imagery. So the guided imagery part, just to explain it, you can talk somebody through any type of guided imagery exercise. So like when I was working with kids who had cancer or sickle cell anemia, they were experiencing a lot of pain. They needed healing. So the cancer group, I would imagine Pac-Man moving through your body and devouring the cancer cells. And the sickle cell group, they were experiencing a lot of pain. So we imagined warm light starting at their feet and moving through their body. And as it moved through their body, that warm light would also remove pain as it went through and filled up their body with light. We could talk about, I had an exercise where people would walk through woods, go down stone steps, find a clear pool, sit by the pool. They could look in the pool as a mirror and come to some realization. But I think one of my favorite ones is that they sit by the pool, they're relaxed, and they meet a muse. And the muse could be anyone, anybody, could be a talking animal, could be anything. It's whatever their muse is. And they could ask the muse a question and they'll get an answer. And then we walk back up the stone steps and through the forest. And really, of course, the muse is our own subconscious. We're asking our own subconscious, basically, the answer that we know deep down is right for us. So there's all kinds of different things we can do with guided imagery. But we're just going to do the first two, which is breathing and muscle relaxation. And if you're unable to use a certain body part, maybe you have arthritis or something, but if you can't do it, just do what you can. So sit in a comfortable position. And what we're going to do major muscle groups. And we're going to start with our feet, and we're going to tense each muscle group, hold it, and release it. We're going to do each muscle group 3 times. Okay. All right. So we're going to start with our feet. Oh, hey, before that, we got to do breathing. Sorry about that. Yeah. So breathing's easy, but so breathe in through your mouth, hold it a second, and exhale through your nose. Do it at your own pace. And as you breathe, try not to think about anything else but what it's like to feel the air, the oxygen going into your body, filling your lungs, what it feels like going out of your body, what it sounds like. If you find your mind wandering, just think about breathing again. So let's try it. Breathe in, hold it, and breathe out through your nose. And now, try to do it on your own. It depends on how you feel. You can keep your eyes open or close your eyes, whatever's comfortable for you. You may yawn. Maybe your body's not used to getting a lot of oxygen. Maybe you're a little tense or stressed or got a lot going on. Maybe you're tired and you just realized it, but maybe your mind will be a little more tingly because you're getting a little more oxygen in there. So keep breathing, keep thinking about your breathing, but we're going to take our feet and we're going to tighten our toes and our feet, hold the tension, and we're going to relax. Tighten those toes and feet again and relax. One more time. And as you relax your feet, just kind of let them hang there and you'll feel the pressure of the floor against the bottom of your feet and don't need to expend any energy. And now take your legs and tense the major muscle groups in your legs. Hold it, relax it. Do it a second time, tense, hold, and relax. One more time. Tense those legs and relax. And now I'd like you to take your midsection, your stomach and chest, and tense those muscles and relax. Tense them again. Relax. One more time and relax. Remember your breathing. Breathe deeply. Breathe steadily. Get that oxygen into your muscle groups and your mind. A lot of us hold our tension in different areas of our bodies. So as we move to our upper bodies, I'd like you to take your hands and make two fists and then relax. Make those fists again and relax. One more time and relax. Some of us hold our tension in our shoulders. So tense your shoulders and relax. A second time. Relax. One more time. Relax. You might feel like your shoulders are a little lower than they were a few minutes ago, a little more relaxed. The last thing I'd like you to do, we hold our tension in our jaws or our foreheads or our necks. And I'd just like you to make a crazy face and tense up all of your facial muscles. Don't worry about looking crazy. Relax. Tense them again. Relax. One more time. As you release all those facial muscles, your whole body should be a little less tense, a little more relaxed. Remember to keep breathing, and then we would move on to the guided imagery, depending on what the issue was. So maybe that's a good way to end this class. All right, any questions before we leave?
I actually have a question.
Yeah.
So I tried this with a 6-year-old because they like we were trying to match emotion to like their body. It's called like the progressive. I found like a kid-friendly progressive muscle relaxation on YouTube and everything. But what was so interesting is he was like self-aware enough to be like, this feels uncomfortable. I don't like this. And so even though he felt the difference of like when I had him go like this versus like let go, um, he was like, I don't want to do that again. So I mean, and that's fine, but like I'm just curious, like for someone, I'm assuming of all ages, like there could be scenarios where this like feels very uncomfortable for them. Like, would you encourage them to work through it, or would you find another route?
Yeah, I just asked them about the discomfort.
Mm.
So can you express the feeling of discomfort? What's the underlying emotion? So we're still connecting emotions with body, or, so I don't want to get into any trauma with them or anything, but in what way? Tell me about, how does it feel uncomfortable?
Mm.
Maybe they're embarrassed, or maybe they just have never done this before. And then I give them the option. We don't have to do this together, but sometimes if you have trouble sleeping, it's a good way to just lay in bed at night. And if you are comfortable doing it by yourself, breathe and do muscle relaxation. And before you know it, you'll fall asleep.
Mm.
So I want to understand the discomfort. If it's because of some type of trauma it reminds them of, we can do something else,
Okay. Thank you. That was helpful.
What else? All right, we'll see you later.